morning to you. Today is Monday, 29th of June, 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. Now, 29th of June, this is a significant day. Tomorrow, even more, because it's month end, quarter end, and H1 end. So we have the confluence of three important dates in the year 2026. So nothing better to start what we are talking about today, because actually we are talking about sequencing, we are talking about timing, we are talking about disjointed activities that actually can be a good thing because we can identify them, and a bad thing if you identify them and you do nothing about it. Now, in terms of advisory board, we are going to go through the system again, but this time we're going to look throughout this week. What I'm going to go is to what are the right cadence, the timing, the processes through the whole model. So we have the model in front of us, and but I'm going to explain that actually these kind of things, we spoke about how to pick an advisory board. We spoke about what to do with an advisory board. But the thing is actually the calendar, the sequence, when these things are going to happen is very important too. It's not, let's assume that you have an advisory board, let's assume that you have already decided which is your priorities. Now, in which time frames you're going to do this, this is pretty much a conversation for this week. Now, so this is usually useful for people like founded business but do not fail because you as a founder, the CEO or the managing director, you are weak. You struggle because you're still too central to everything. So you're still the strongest salesperson, the memory bank, the why the partnership works. So you're still the person who calm the clients, the fix deliveries, read the numbers, push projects through, and explain the strategy, etc., etc. So at first, that looks like very strong, as we discussed the prior weeks, but then it starts to become the ceiling of the company because, as I mentioned, I think actually I shared this story that I did back in last month, 40 companies in the northeast coast of the US. Many of these companies, some of them 100 years old, inherited, so it's a kind of a family legacy. They had very proudly said, and many of them, that we are a $10 million company. And I said, yeah, perfectly fine. For how long? Some of them say 25 years, so they say 15 years. So just on the currency devaluation, those companies should be in the 17, 16 mark in revenue today, not in 10 years, in the $10 million. So you see where the ceiling sometimes is hidden in the same things that you're proud of. This is not a negative thing. It's pretty much to understand how you see the company, what you're proud of, at the same time, how you can create probably a constraint. So looking at the model, let's start to go into practical. So on top, we have the scalability of the organization. On the right, your predictability. On the bottom, which is the systems, which is your workflow, operating procedures. And on the left, your edge. And we mentioned edge, we mentioned your transformation, your innovation, what makes your company stand out and make it relevant for the current market and the future. So obviously in the middle, we have the advisory board that operate all these systems. So the purpose of an advisory board is not just to give you a good chat room every month or every quarter. It's just to bring all these things together, and which is where we're talking today particularly is a sequencing. Are we watching the things in the right order? Everybody's coordinated, or pretty much everybody's having different conversations? So I just gave away the golden nugget, if you made of today. So let's take a look at three problems with this situation. The problem number one is that growth gets mistaken for strength, right? So revenues raises, the team gets bigger, the brand becomes better known, but the business may still depend on one or two people. If they leave or they decide to slow down, the whole business is impacted, right? Problem number two is that the company becomes harder to read. and sales might be looking good, right? But margins are unclear. Where is that coming from? And when the study that I mentioned, some of the companies has 63% margin or revenues concentrated in one customer without a contract. That was purely relationship. And guess what? The relationships were at a big risk because both parts, both sides of the company, the owner was about to retire, the other person was about to retire too. So what will happen with that company, the 10 million revenue company? Now, projects might be busy, as I mentioned, but cash is getting tighter. People are active. You see that happening all the time, but accountability is blurred. Who owns what? So the board hears progress, but not always the truth underneath it. And the third problem is that leadership treats scales of the company or the predictability of the company or the systems or the edge, the relevancy as a separate work stream. And this is a core conversation today. Sales sits in one meeting. The risks or the consideration for the problems are sitting in a separate meeting. The strategy sits somewhere else, probably not even having a meeting in terms of strategies. And transformation, what makes your company relevant, becomes a project. And then next month or next quarter is another project. And again. So the things are not continued. It doesn't see a light at the end. So controls becomes a checklist, not wonder why the founders or yourself feel very stretched. And let me show you a little image to represent this, because I think it's relevant to today's conversation, is this. And I'm going to explain what it looks from the left to the right. So imagine your business has 4 clocks on the wall, right? That's the image on the left. Each clock works on its own, but none of them are set to the same time. So what I mean time, you can have sales saying one thing, finance say another thing, operations says a different thing, strategy probably says something completely different. So, but nobody is coordinated with the other. There's no sequence. So the problem is not the effort, because everybody is conscious of what they have to do, how to do it, but it's not the effort that they put. The problem is the orchestration, which is the image on the right. The orchestration means when the people start to coordinate their efforts towards a single goal, which is that a company can design. Could be scaling, could be predictability, meaning actually how they secure their revenues and the contractors, etc., in a more secure manner or more documented manner. Could be the system, how we govern these things, or how we make, on the left of the quadrant of the operating system, how we make our company more relevant for everything. So remember, if you have the problem on the left, you can work it out, because actually you need somebody, particularly an advisory board, can look into these things from the very different angles, which is a model that I presented now again onto the screen. So where we are orchestrating the things in a way that the company is getting more precise on the things that it's doing. So as a board advisor, what I would propose is to consider the following. Use the advisory board to create one rhythm on this orchestration. No more meetings, no more reports, no more clever advice, but a rhythm, something actually you can start to understand how it works. So in the first rhythm, for example, is a scaling. And the question is the business growing in a way that can be repeated without the founder or yourself rescuing the business every time? The second rhythm could be predictability. Does the business know where the money is made, where it's trapped, and which assets deserve more investment? The third rhythm is the system. Can the company deliver, report, and control risk without constant senior intervention? And the fourth rhythm is your edge, your innovation, your transformation. Is the business still relevant, or is this defending yesterday's model? So this is where an advisory board helps. It gives the founder, yourself, or your executive team access to outside judgment before the pressure turns into damage. It brings in specialist capability without needing to hire every expert full time, and it gives the company a way to move from scattered concern to a clear sequence of the things that have to be done when. And that sequence matters. Why? If you try to scale before you have a role clarity, growth becomes stress, right? So if you, the other thing is, if you chase revenue before you understand the asset quality, your growth becomes a money trap. Because actually, I'm going to explain this later on in the week. If you build controls too late, for example, resilience becomes a firefighting, because you everything is a problem, seems to be a problem every single day or every week. So, and if you transform without a discipline, and discipline is not a punishment, is a way to do things, change becomes a theater, because actually every month, every quarter is something new that's happening, and people, so, well, we thought that we were dead, like the picture on the left. We thought that we were doing this thing, but actually the other team was doing something different. So it's a big theater, because everybody reports something amazing, but nothing is done at the end. So the advisory board's job is to help the leadership, you as a founder and your team, to see what should come first. Now, what do you gain working with me? Three things: business outcomes, differentiators, and risk reductions. In terms of business outcomes, it's a business that becomes easier to lead, easier to fund, easier to scale, and easier to transform beyond yourself as a founder or your leadership team. So the differentiator is rotating international advisory boards that build around the milestones in front of the company. And we have 4 here, like scale, predictability, systems, and edge. So that means a faster implementation, like hiring one executive team, as I mentioned, is a lower overhead than a big consulting firm, no talent locked in, so we can change and bring new members as the project and the work progress. And the risk reduction is fragmentation. Instead of having separate conversations about growth, capital, controls, and transformations, we integrate them into a single operating system, right? Okay, so let's see what we can do in the next 30 minutes or so. I have this wonderful grill that I prepared for you. You can screenshot it or look the video later on and make it your own. And what is this about? You can do this in 30 minutes or less. Take your last 4 leadership meetings and write one word beside each one: scale, predictability, systems, or edge. And edge, remember, is your transformation, your innovation. And we'll talk about this specifically later in the week. What is the innovation and transformation they're looking for? And then ask yourself, are these being managed as a sequence or still separate conversations? And remember the other picture, and remember this one, and say, is it a separate conversation or is it a sequence conversation? Sequence conversation meaning that actually the things are working together. So the answer tells you where the advisory board operating system starts or not, right? Okay, so that is the image that we have today. This is a section that we're going to talk tomorrow. And in the whole model, particularly tomorrow, we're going to talk specifically about the scaling, the commercial acceleration. So let's pause it here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow we move into scale. As I mentioned, we will look at why the founder dependencies can dress itself as a momentum, right? And why your brand, your people, and your partnerships must stop relying on one person or 2 people, or specifically in some people that actually can be very dangerous because they don't transfer that knowledge. They are the bottlenecks, etc., etc. Now, if you are a founder or a leadership team or a board member in a company of 50 employees or more, or with 10 millions of revenue or more, and you want to implement an advisory board that operates these systems, let's have a 30-minute chat. So I can understand where you're coming from, where you are today, and where you're looking to go with your company. So we can design an advisory board that brings 24% revenue increases, and this is proven by the Bank of Canada Business Development Team, 18% more productivity with a fast implementation, like hiring one executive, lower overhead than a big consulting firm, no talent locked in, as I mentioned, and the swappable members every 6 months or so as the projects evolve. Right. Have a great day, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.